Another week on the podcast, Chandler.
Yep.
We had a
Paradise.
interesting episode last week. It was just only about Twin Peaks, which is
if last time I checked was number 12 on the BFI Top 100. I think was the return. I don't remember.
I thought it was number 2.
It might have been.
Right below Citizen Kane.
No, that was the old list. The new one's Gooby, and then right below that is the return.
Oh, Gooby.
Yeah,
that's right. Gooby. I forgot.
Yeah.
It's the hidden gem classic.
Only 3 people own it. Yeah. It's exclusive. 2 of them are BFI critics. The third one's Nick Johnson.
So this week last week was an interesting episode because we didn't do a BFI movie.
You can't just talk about Twin Peaks in 30 minutes? No, you just can't. You just can't.
I mean, it's true.
You can't.
It really was like, where did the time go?
I'm surprised we got 90 minutes out of it. And I still wasn't even close.
So last week was a bit of a weird episode. This week is also going to be a bit of a weird episode because we're going to begin. We usually do the new movie first and then the BFI movie second. But this week we're going to be doing the BFI movie first because of our guest this week. This week we have a guest who's actually been on the podcast before.
Yes. What was
that
episode number?
Was lost. That was episode 13.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Which our actual episode 13, if you ever bothered to look,
I didn't.
Was called F or 0 for episode 13.
Oh god.
Because we failed
at it. Oh, and it was also 0 for conduits. Yes.
Yeah, it was. It worked out perfectly. But we have scheduled this guest to reappear, and we may or may not publish that other episode eventually. Audio quality issues, but notwithstanding, it is a perfectly fine episode. So this week we have another good friend from film school, our friend Brenton Bender, who is currently a graduate film student at USC Film School, which is very cool. Say hi to the folks, Brenton.
Very cool.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you back on, and
for the first time
and the second time. And here to talk about our BFI movie of the week, which is Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger's A Matter of Life and Death.
The second of their movies on this list.
And last, I believe.
Really?
What was the first?
Not the Red Shoes?
Red Shoes?
Yeah, I have officially confirmed that the Red Shoes are for some reason not on this list.
Weird.
Nowhere to be seen.
That's interesting.
So one of these weeks we'll have to schedule that in as just
the other movie, Brenton, was Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which I can understand because that one is unabashedly British. Which maybe that's why they went with it.
So the British Film Institute has to vote for it.
I would have thought the Red Shoes is one of those things that's on all these favorite lists.
It's always
really well-known filmmakers. So I just assumed
the director's list.
I would have thought that
definitely.
If any of their films, Red Shoes.
But.
Yeah.
Well, as long as we got the one, I subscribe to the belief that it should be one film per director, but Jacob does not.
No, I think that's a ridiculous.
But to be fair, there are 2. There's
there's 2.
There are 2. So you get one for each.
Like I'd put 2 Coen Brothers movies on the list.
Well, it's one of those things where, like, let's say you run out of good movies by good directors, and you're picking lesser quality films just because you've already picked great films.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of good movies from decent directors, but that's not what we're talking about.
No, we're not. All right. Since Brenton is our guest, maybe you'd like to introduce the movie, and if you'd like to say anything else about yourself that I might have not covered.
Oh no, you said plenty.
Okay. You want to remain anonymous.
But yeah, A Matter of Life and Death is a film directed by our esteemed filmmakers, Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. And it follows a World War II British pilot who is supposed to die at the end of World War II, but he gets lost in the fog, and he ends up waking up on a beach, and then he falls in love with a American what would you call her? A radio
traffic
technician,
radio operator.
Um, and then the rest of the movie is him pleading his case with the angels and the powers that be, that he should be free to live his life and be with the one he loves rather than go up to heaven. And it's wonderful. It's the best PP film, in my opinion.
Okay, so Chandler, your general thoughts.
It's good. I liked it. I think a huge part of why I liked it, and this is mainly first of all, I find the lead actor, Peter Carter, that guy,
David Niven?
Yeah. He gives Colonel Blimp a run for his money as far as most British person ever put to film. I think he's such a gentleman. He's so soft-spoken but eloquent. But what I really enjoyed was the fact that he told, I don't know the actor's name, I'm just going to call him Colonel Blimp. He told
Roger Livesey.
So yeah, he told Colonel Blimp that he saw, he went to heaven or whatever, or no, that he was supposed to die, and he's seeing this weird Frenchman from beyond in heaven or whatever. And I just love that the movie is just like, oh, okay, and believes him. I feel like any other lesser movie would be like, this guy's crazy. But no, he tells him, I'm seeing a Frenchman who stops time, and they're like, okay, let's try to solve this.
So A Matter of Life and Death is pretty great. I cannot say it's my favorite Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger film. I probably like The Red Shoes and Colonel Blimp a bit more. But this viewing was particularly interesting in that I liked it more than my first viewing, so it jumped up.
Just like Colonel Blimp.
Yeah, that usually happens on second viewings for me. But one of the things that really stuck out to me this time was how simple and how quick the movie goes.
It does.
It feels
Definitely.
really short.
It does, yeah.
Like the climax of the film is, he goes to heaven to plead his case, and you're there just like that. Like there's not that much going on before you get to that kind of main set piece at the end, which is interesting. It's a well-paced film, particularly for the time that it was made in.
I think I definitely still like this, or Colonel Blimp, a little bit more. And I think a main reason as to why that is I love the first two acts. I especially love the opening scene. It is a great hook to this movie, and I really enjoyed just the way that I love the set design of the plane. I love how he casually observes that his co-pilot is dead. You get a sense of who this guy is just from how formally composed he is in almost imminent death. But I think when he gets up to heaven, or when the trial starts, it becomes less of a case for this guy and more of a roast of England.
No, but that's the brilliance of the movie, because it's, I mean, at its centerpiece, I think it's a propaganda film as to why America should team up with Britain moving forward after the war, because they basically set up this super racist American saying all these reasons why Britain is bad, and the U.S. should just be on its own, and David Niven's character should be killed and not be with the U.S. Protagonist. But then you have this British person fighting for equality and the cohesion of the two nations in this beautiful love story. And it really kind of encapsulates the story of post-World War II U.S. and United Kingdom's cooperation with the free world and dealing with the aftermath of Europe.
It's really weird watching this today, because the idea that there would even need to be a propaganda film that to bring us closer together
Yeah.
is kind of absurd, because you're like, we're already close. What are you talking about? We were close during World War II. What? I don't know, right? And let's not pull any punches. I mean, Great Britain certainly does not have a good track record when it comes to nations around the world, developing nations.
This is
it's still developing for reasons that may be related to
which
the UK.
I enjoyed that, because it was like essentially a good 5 to 10 minutes of all of the victims of British imperialism just sort of roasting England. And I understand the idea behind it being a more unifying message, but the first 2 acts don't really deal with that. They're more about this contained story about this guy who should have died but didn't. And it's this great little fantasy story about the afterlife communicating with the real world. And then when they get up to the trial doesn't even become about this anymore. It's about just England in general, which I understand that getting over that American lawyers like prejudice of England is part of the story, but I just felt like it took a little bit too long and delved into something that wasn't adequately set up in the first 2 acts. But the thing is like, just because it deviates from what it was before is I don't think that deviation is necessarily bad, because I did find it very entertaining, and I thought it was, it was a pretty pointed message, especially coming from British filmmakers. And when we learned a little bit about what happened behind the scenes when they tried to incorporate a lot of the real world politics of Nazi Germany into Colonel Blimp, I definitely feel as though that message was genuine. It's just that it doesn't really align with the first 2 parts of the movie. But it does eventually come full circle and become more about Peter again. It's just that little deviation is what keeps it from being perfect to me. But one thing I did love, I loved the look of the afterlife trial or courtroom. I loved just how many people were there. I loved the big stairs. It's a very imaginative movie in that sense.
Another thing, so I noticed the 2 things I really noticed this time around were the pacing of the film, but also on a first viewing, I think it's easy to see the events play out as, he's actually being pulled to heaven. Like, heaven is actually a real place.
Yeah.
Right? And I think much more on the second viewing, I realized how much the film presents that as an ambiguity, as it is very much probably more inside of his mind and a projection of him, because the film sets him up as a poet, as someone who's very kind of artistic and intellectual in his head, and then puts this imagining of heaven, of the very first scene is his buddy who died on the plane waiting for him. And that seems like a very logical thing of like, you've passed out, you're falling from an airplane, and you think about the last person you saw is like, he's going to heaven, he's waiting for you. And then he wakes up. And it's just interesting that the film, it's probably one of the first films to do this. Also maybe the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, of like blurring the line between what is reality in the film and what isn't. Of, you can very much look at the film as, oh, that's actually heaven, but it's also very interesting to look at as a projection of him, and as a British person, his ideas of all these people.
Okay, see, I get that, but I feel like the extent to which Colonel Blimp takes part in this trial kind of disproves that it's a projection. Now, stop me if you didn't think this, but when the other pilot goes up to heaven and they're talking about, or they realize that there's been a mistake and Peter didn't go up there, they refer to this mistake as something that's only happened one other time before. And the fact that Colonel Blimp just seems to get right on board with this whole afterlife.
Dr. Reeves.
Yeah, okay.
He's
Dr. Reeves. The fact that Dr. Reeves is so invested in this from the get-go. Did you ever at one point think that Dr. Reeves was maybe the first mistake, and he's the guy who's been living out on Earth avoiding the sentencing?
Oh, Oh, okay. I never thought of it that. I always thought he was just a genuinely good doctor, and he had the best bedside manner one could have. And he
Yes.
took David Niven at his word when David Niven said he was seeing a 1700s Frenchman
Yes.
stop time and talk to him.
Okay, but I read that more as like he's a doctor who knows that these kind of psychosis things that happen inside of the brain,
Yeah.
Mhm.
like he's not treating him as a crazy person. He is crazy, but treating him with like respect and like he's actually seeing
Yes.
these
So
things
you think
and
he
By,
played
treating
by
along
the way,
with dignity.
Yeah.
they based Dr. Reeves' character off of Michael Powell's brother-in-law, who was a neurosurgeon in the
Oh.
1940s, and Michael Powell went to many brain surgeries and just learned all this stuff about neuroscience that he used with Emmerich Pressburger in writing the story and all of Dr. Reeves' dialogue.
Interesting.
Dr. Reeves is a great character. I was really
Oh, he's
one of my
great.
problems with the film is I was sad when the film contrived to get him dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I didn't want him to go. Don't die,
I
Dr.
loved
Reeves.
the French guy. I thought the French guy was pretty great.
It's
too.
made up of a lot of like really interesting caricatures,
Yeah.
but they're also
Mhm.
characters in their own right. But yeah, we were discussing the reality of the film.
There's a bunch of like little side background historical figures that just pop up too. If you watch the big all of the congressional people walking in to the actual judgment.
Oh yeah.
There's random historical figures that they just place throughout.
Which I enjoyed that they didn't put a lot of attention on to those people.
Mhm.
Because I feel like any other film would be like, oh, here's Genghis Khan. Oh, here's Benjamin Franklin. I also always find it interesting to see a non-American country's depiction of Americans. And I thought the depiction of the American lawyer was pretty accurate. Guy seemed like kind of a dick.
The first American that's not June that you see goes straight for a Coca-Cola can in heaven and just starts drinking it, and then walks up and demands that they get treated the best possible
Oh,
way.
you're talking about those soldiers up in heaven?
Yeah, the soldiers
yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
the fighter pilots.
Yeah.
They're very it's interesting how, because I came to this conclusion that it must be a projection of David Niven's consciousness, in that the way that heaven is portrayed, and the way that heaven is portrayed is very much unheaven-like in the way that, you know, it looks idyllic,
It
but
looks
everyone there
clean.
still very much has the prejudices
Yeah.
and the influences of their past lives, where, you know, all the soldiers from World War II, they sit together.
Mm-hmm.
And they all come together and arrive in heaven in like their packs of in their specified areas. And I'm like, if you were imagining heaven, I'm pretty sure that most people who do don't think of it as, maybe they do, maybe I'm being more looking at it from like a standpoint of today,
Yeah.
of where we're much more of an egalitarian society and there aren't divisions, as strong divisions. But I would think that heaven would be a place where those divisions don't exist.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter who you are, and that once you have died, the American who tries to prosecute him would not hold that grudge in such a beautiful place for so long.
Yeah.
And it must be a projection. In order to make sense of it in my own mind, the only way it made sense was like, oh, it must be a projection of this British man who just is thinking about the U.S. in this way. And,
Yeah.
you know,
There's a few times that they take jabs at the 1940s U.S. because when Falcon, what's his name?
Which one's that?
which
Farland?
one,
The
I think his
second-
name's Farland.
Mate?
The Bostonian.
The
I
lawyer?
think his name's
Whoever,
the guy that's a super racist.
The guy who was shot, the first shot by the British. The first dead. Yeah, okay.
When he's talking about American freedoms and liberties, they will cut to African American soldiers sitting in the pews, with just like disdain on their faces.
Well, I love it because not only, it's Africa, especially at that time, was a country that was sort of being taken advantage by everyone. But I love that they're front row watching these two people who have more than anyone imperialized their country. I just thought it was funny. But here's my question. Why do you think heaven is black and white in this movie?
A style choice to separate it from the real world.
Which I get that, but the color itself, you typically, again, this is going off of our modern day conception of heaven, but you typically picture it as something more than real, you know? And I found the design to heaven to be kind of strange. It was weirdly clinical. It was utopian.
It's very modern.
Yeah.
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 Modernist in that.
It didn't feed into the religious stereotypes that you'd see in like
no clouds, pearly gates,
big pearly gates or anything. Yep. It's very very.
They almost
very
use like not
utopian.
Quite, but like Art Deco kind of the way that people in the 40s were like projecting onto like what would modern look like for them.
Yeah,
which
I think they chose black and white for heaven mainly because they wanted the very stark contrast. You're either alive or you're dead. And in heaven, it's going to be black and white. And in real life, that's going to be in color because people know color. Yeah, we see in color. So we know that life is in color, but we don't know what the afterlife looks like.
Yeah.
So I think it was just a good way to separate the two.
When Chandler said that he would have thought that like heaven would have been more, all I could think about is when you like pull a saturation filter onto a Photoshop image and then just crank it all the way up to 100 and all the colors just like blow out.
All I'm saying is
and
that
like that's real. That's
Michael
heaven.
Bay
just
might
all the
know what
colors
heaven
are blown
looks
out.
like.
Exactly.
Michael Bay.
I wonder what Michael Bay would say if he went back to the 1940s and 50s and looked at Technicolor film and said, "Yeah, just up the saturation." And they look at him and they say, "What do you mean?"
He would up the saturation.
This is the most vibrant color we got.
He would up the saturation, and then you would hand Peter David a Bud Light.
Yeah.
And there you go. I will admit to my sins. I watched this on YouTube, and the quality was not great. Yeah,
it's hard to find. I was surprised.
I thought it was on Criterion because that's where I watched Colonel Blimp. And then
it was on Criterion at one point.
Was it? Okay.
Was removed.
There isn't a Blu-ray, is there?
It's not on Amazon Prime, which is surprising.
I own the Criterion Blu-ray.
Oh, do you?
That's how I watched it.
Good cover.
Yeah, well,
great cover.
I'm trying to get like one Blu-ray every 2 weeks while this sale's going on. I was gonna get Colonel Blimp next, but I kind of want to get this just to rewatch it, because I feel like, especially the quality of the video I was watching, which wasn't terrible, but wasn't great. Because I immediately watched like the 4K restoration trailer after I saw it, and I'm like, "Oh, this looks amazing in the 4K trailer." So I think
there's some beautiful cinematography in it.
Well, even
there's some really beautiful. So here's the thing: we came from Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, which has it's Technicolor, but it's also
stagey.
It's almost like TV in a way, how you might imagine it. And Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is interesting because it has a lot of that too,
especially in the real world stuff, especially like the opening scene in the plane.
Yeah, the Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger are known for using Technicolor in particular.
Yeah, this
particular way of film and combining the three colors to make actual color film. And the way that looks in some scenes looks a lot like Colonel Blimp, where it's very stagey, and there are one or two shots where I might even call it bad cinematography.
Wow.
Although I can't fault it for that.
Yeah, to be fair, yes.
And then there's other shots, particularly some of like the matte painting shots and some of like the larger scale things, where also in the doctor's observatory
Yeah,
where he's looking out on the village, and then there's a shot where he opens up the door to let her in, and it's just black frame and it's a frame within a frame.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some shots like that are just gorgeous and like really cinematic. But it's interesting that the film like kind of bridges those two versions of Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, where it's very stagey, very TV-esque kind of from our perspective these days, to something that's very cinematic, matte painting, and
I really like that TV-ish look, though. As far as the set design
I'm not
goes.
complaining about it. Yeah. I'm just describing it that way.
I think this film has one of the greatest transitions to heaven that has ever been depicted in film, which is the eyelid closed shot.
Oh my God. That freaked me. I hated it. It was great. Like, don't get me wrong. But when it goes into his eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Something with eyes.
And then it just desaturates into black and white.
Yeah. It's, let me also say that this is the opening sequence of this film where it's floating through space and it's the voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
It's really kind of low tech visual effects by today's standards.
Mm.
And it's like, this is almost like those shots of space are almost like the precursor to 2001.
Yeah.
And then 2001 is a precursor to like Interstellar today.
Whoa.
Of like, I'm not talking about quality here, Chandler. Calm your shit.
All right.
I'm just talking about like quality of the portrayal of space. And this is like, they just drew space and then panned the camera.
I didn't like that.
But it works. I thought it worked, particularly on a second time
They did it
around.
in two panes. They had a couple dots that they used as stars in the foreground that they would pan a little bit faster than the background.
I don't mind the look of space. I just hated the opening text. I don't think it added much, but
I think it's just fairy tale-esque.
Yeah, it is
in its delivery.
And that's why I forgive a lot of earlier movies for these kinds of things, but
it's like Once Upon a Time in Nazi-occupied France, like the start of Inglourious Basterds.
Yeah,
it's you can forgive earlier films for these kinds of things if the story and everything is working, because we've talked plenty about films like Intolerance, amongst others, that are innovative and do interesting things, but ultimately by today's standards, you have to judge it by today's standards, because that's the only thing, going forward. You can't always judge the past by the past.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to some people might want to rebel against that, like, oh, we have to look at it from that perspective. But I think when you look at it from the idea that there's films like A Matter of Life and Death and Casablanca, Citizen Kane, that still work so well today, so well, despite the time they were made in, that I don't think you can really defend other movies that don't work as well but are still held up because of some technical innovation they had.
Yeah,
I don't think you can defend those films as well when you have films like this. Because the story works.
Effort ages better than anything. And even if it doesn't look great, as long as you can tell a lot of time went into it, I think that's when it works its best.
Effort and story.
Effort and story, yes. Well, story takes effort.
And, this is just a film about the true love transcending time and space, essentially.
Yes.
Which is very wholesome when you get down to it.
It is, and I think a huge part of it, again, I cannot stress the lead actor's performance enough. I loved him. Almost as much as I loved Colonel Blimp in Colonel Blimp, not in this movie.
David Niven is probably my favorite golden age British actor. Because he's so charming and polite and nice, and he has that British quality about him without having the stiff upper lip that they got in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. I just love, he's so calm through everything. Through the beginning when his plane's being taken down, in the middle when the Frenchman is telling him he's going to heaven and going to die, he's just always like, wait, hold on. Wait, no.
Can I get my whiskey shots back? You gonna let me have those back?
Wonderful. Yeah, I still like Colonel Blimp, though. A little bit more. This is great though. I enjoyed this.
So, if you're to put into words, Brenton, why is this one of your favorite movies?
I just think it has a holistic view on the human experience, and it doesn't pull punches in terms of picking sides. It just says we're all in this together, and we all should get along. And really, there are no bad guys. There are some people that have major prejudices
That's
in
true.
the movie.
That is true.
Obviously, but I love movies that don't paint a black and white bad guy good guy picture. It's just everyone's trying to live their life, and some people step on other people's toes, but in the end, we can all get along, and what really matters is true love.
In English,
The American ideals.
One thing that I don't think aged well was ironically the climax of the film where true love is supposed to save the day, where the staircase is going back up, and it's the idea they had was that true love stops the staircase, but like the camera just kind of like
there's a lot of weird Dutch angles
stops.
in this movie,
but like if you were doing it today, like you would think that they could like shake the camera a bit more. Right, like I didn't get the feeling that the staircase stopped. It just was like,
that's escalator was an actual thing that they built around like the matte paintings of the statues in space behind them. But apparently it was the loudest thing that the UK studios ever built, and
oh god,
all the audio was unusable in any of the shots you see it moving.
I'm sure.
I would just love
the fact that it was a little janky. I give them a pass.
I would just love to be there or hear the raw audio where you just try to hear those two actors deliver their British lines over that.
The best line readings in this are the French collector character, the angel, like 71 or whatever his number is.
Yeah.
When he's yelling Peter, as Peter runs down the stairs.
Peter,
come back. And then the silent interaction between David Niven and his pilot friend, when they see each other in the end, they have like a the most bizarre, like Shaka Bra communication between each other that is reminiscent of like Bill and Ted, where they don't care about like the conflict of the situation and what the stakes are. They're just happy to see each other.
It's wholesome. It's nice.
It is.
nice.
Yes.
Yeah. So the question is, this is on the BFI. This is on the BFI Top 100 list. Does it deserve to be here?
Yes.
Chandler?
Well, I subscribe to the one director per list rule, so I'm going to say no. But that doesn't mean it's a bad movie.
Wait, was this ranked above?
This was ranked above Colonel Blood.
Yeah. So
Okay.
on my list, there were a bunch of ties on the BFI list. So a bunch of them are listed, like if a bunch of them got the same amount of vote, they'd all be listed as number 80 on the list.
Interesting.
And it just skipped to the next number, like 85, because there were 4 ties.
Mm-hmm.
So I got rid of that just because we needed to have an order.
Right.
So this isn't the actual place, but on this adjusted list, it's A Matter of Life and Death is number 92 on the critics list, and The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is number 97, also on the critics list. There are no Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburgers on the directors
I find that so
list.
hard to believe.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Especially the
I
Red
was in
Shoes.
shock.
Yeah, I would think Red Shoes would be a top 60 film of all time for
At least for the
BFI
directors. Because I feel like every director at some point is named.
It's quoted so much. Yeah.
I've never seen it, and I was excited to watch it, but now I'll just have to watch it on my own time.
Yeah, now you'll just have to watch it after you're done with this.
Now I don't have any contractual obligations to watch this movie.
There is a montage sequence, dancing montage sequence in The Red Shoes that is some of the greatest filmmaking ever made. So I don't agree with it, but I'm not going to say that it's wrong because, you know, so many films. We have over 100 years of cinema. So.
That's true.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I think that we're so used to hearing about The Red Shoes, particularly from filmmakers like Martin Scorsese, who's probably the biggest and loudest proponent of that film. I think he's on the commentary and he does an introduction and he's
Same
just
with
on a
Colonel
whole
Blimp.
bunch of special features. Yeah. And he's so loud about it that we hear about it more than maybe a lot of directors do. I'd be curious. I need to look at this because I don't know if I ever told Chandler this or if Chandler ever figured it out on his own. You can see who voted on what.
You can?
What critics voted on what movies, what directors voted on what movie on the BFI website. And I link to that every episode in the show notes just for so people know. And I usually look, and usually so far, the bottom list, I have yet to recognize a critic except for last week or the week before whenever we did Intolerance, and I recognized Armin White.
Oh,
who that's his
favorite movie.
Reasons.
It's his favorite movie. I just want to say, this whole the absence of The Red Shoes is funny to me because I can just picture Martin Scorsese going up to the BFI with his copy of The Red Shoes on Blu-ray, and he's like, "Consider this," and they're like, "Nah, Imitation of Life, much better." Is
any Martin Scorsese picture on the BFI Top 100?
I don't think so.
Is Raging Bull or
yeah? Oh yeah, we've
Taxi
got
Driver.
Raging Bull, Taxi Driver,
Raging Bull.
Goodfellas.
Hey,
I mean that's it. They're all fairly high up.
There's no Coens on the list.
If you asked him, I bet he would be up for removing one of his films and putting The Red Shoes back on the
most
list.
definitely.
Yes.
Wait.
The Red Shoes has one of the greatest character flaws in
As in the character itself is written badly, or the flaw?
No,
is
the character
compelling?
has one of the greatest flaws that feeds into the story.
Oh, does she barf when she lies?
What's his name again? The actor that I love so much, Anton Walbrook. His character. I mentioned this before in our Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. All these titles with life in them. From them, but
is he the
Anton
German?
Walbrook? His character in The Red Shoes, I think, is one of my favorite. Not villains, not necessarily antagonists, but someone
he's just
who is
a man that likes control, and then he got it taken away.
He's a force to be reckoned with in the film. Like, he's not an antagonist. He's not someone who is against the protagonist. It's very interesting that way.
Red Shoes is another one of their films that does not have a bad guy. I guess you could say that Anton is the bad guy in that film if you needed 2.1 out.
Yes.
But it's very gray. The entire movie is very gray.
Colonel Blimp doesn't even have a bad guy.
Yeah.
They have Nazis, but there's no particular
are the bad guy.
Nazi that is,
And in A Matter of Life and Death, the Nazis are also the bad guys.
Yeah. In the 49th parallel, the Nazis are also bad guys.
So for Michael Palin and Ember Pressburger, the only real bad people in the world were Nazis.
I don't
and we
think
can't really fault them.
Unless you're
or the Nazis the good guy.
You're God-fearing nun in the black narcissist, then you could be considered a bad guy there.
Oh yeah, there's no Nazis in that one. Sad.
Arguably one of its bigger flaws.
Yes.
So that was A Matter of Life and Death. It's honestly it's a big recommendation for me.
Yeah, same.
Particularly if you like romance.
It's
romantic
very
films.
romantic.
If you like low fantasy films that are reality and fantastical.
It flies by.
It does.
Yeah.
If you like romance, if you like World War II, and if you like history.
And I think it has some of the best courtroom monologues.
It does.
Of people just explaining their case. Because you'll listen to the Patriot, the Bostonian, talking, and then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I totally get where he's coming from. And then Dr. Reeves comes back and just hits him with more liberty truth and justice.
So another small issue with the movie is that they take the tear from his girlfriend
June
and put it on the flower.
Yeah.
June, yeah, and then they never use it as evidence. Like, you're not bringing that back? Okay, cool, fine.
I also feel like
But
they don't really use the co-pilot either, because it's one of those things where
the co-pilot's just there for moral support.
But he
more
doesn't
than
even do that
anything.
much
Or
moral
no,
support.
they say that he's a witness. to
Oh
their
yeah,
love, but he never knew him. He's dead when they met. Yeah, I love side note, little screenwriter in me. So the female protagonist's name is June. The movie starts at the beginning of May, 2 days before Nazi Germany surrenders, and it's about the UK trying to look past the war, look past May into June, and move on with their lives, but the world won't let them. There's just a little character thing that I loved.
And what comes after July or June? July. What happens in July? America becomes a country.
Exactly.
I don't.
It all makes sense now.
It's layers.
Palpatine's behind it all. All right, so actually, I forgot when I made this introduction that we actually have 3 BFI movies going on this week.
Awesome.
And our next topic, I'm going to let Brenton stay on the call as long as he wants, because he has some things to say. Maybe not.
About what?
Look at him. About short
I'm going
films.
pee. Don't worry about me.
Leave the laptop out of the bathroom.
You cut this part out. This is what the people don't see. Only the Patreons get to see this.
If we only had Patreons.
We have a Patreons page and an OnlyFans page. This could work for either.
This is an interesting episode because we delayed A Matter of Life and Death from last week, and then we did not delay the movie from this week.
Movies.
And since they were 2 short films, we decided to put them here. So we have on the director's list, we have Un Chien Andalou, a Andalusian boy from Louis Buñuel,
and
from 1928. That's on the director's list. And then from
it's not just from
critics
Louis
list.
Buñuel.
What?
You gotta.
And Salvador Dali.
And Salvador Dali, played by Adrian Brody.
Both of them are in the movie. Fun fact.
I didn't know that. Adrian Brody's in this movie?
Yes, baby Adrian Brody's in the movie.
He played the eyeball. I'm just saying this right now. The first YouTube comment I read was, "This was an eye-opening film."
Shut up. That's terrible. And then the second short film we have. So, An Andalusian Boy is 21 minutes long. Second short film we have is A Day in the Country by Jean Renoir from 1936. That is on the critics list, and that is 41 minutes long.
Yeah.
And then the other, we decide to just go with the theme and say, fuck it, we're going to talk about short films from famous directors.
See, that's you never told me about these specific short films. I haven't seen either of these short films that you just talked about, but I have seen many short films made by now well-known directors.
Yes, so we'll talk about the modern short films first, and then in a little bit Chandler and I will have a discussion on those 2 films.
Perfect.
So okay.
So just in general, short films are, I think, fun, kind of underrated, I'll say. I'm even thinking about buying that Martin Scorsese short film collection that's coming out in Criterion in a few months. But I feel like there's 2 kinds of short films. The short one and done conceptual short film that explores every possible angle of its story and idea in the span of 5 or 10 minutes. And then the short films I like to consider as proof of concepts for feature films.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an interesting way, especially today, that I feel like a lot of modern filmmakers get their start. Taika Waititi's short film became What We Do in the Shadows. Damien Chazelle had Whiplash and then turned it into Whiplash. Oh God, what's his name? The guy who did Krisha and Waves.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
I know it's
an S. It's Schultz.
Trey Edward Schultz. Trey Edward Schultz made Krisha as a short film, and then he turned it into a feature film. It's just an interesting way, but there's also the people who excel at just the short film format. The Pixar shorts come to mind. Those are kind of the go-to as far as animation goes. But short films, they're crazy, man. They're a great way to get your foot in the door. We've all made them.
They're not easy.
Well,
they're not easy to make. They're completely different skill set from a feature. I think.
Well, it's okay. So here's the thing. It's you say that, but I think it needs a little caveat in that the artistry of filmmaking is the same.
Yes.
You are not changing the way you film a short film versus the way you film a feature.
Yes.
Cinematic literacy remains the same. It's a constant.
Right. It's the
format
scripting
structure
and the way the story works.
Yes.
Yeah.
Has to be radically altered. But I mean, it's interesting thinking that like back in, the early days of cinema, there were short films like the two we on the BFI list this week. But they were very much a separate thing altogether. There were short films and they were kind of just pet projects of directors. They were meant to be screened before movies. They were a kind of separate thing altogether. But today you have short films, but you have everything. You can watch a piece of media that is a contained narrative that is 1 minute long, 2 minutes long, 5 minutes long, 20 minutes long, 30 minutes long, an hour long, an hour and a half long. So there is, at least from a looking at it from a numbers perspective, there's no difference between, you can trace a feature film and find literally examples of runtimes covering every single minute down to 1 minute of film.
Yes.
These days, there are so many options. And it's interesting just thinking about that conceptually, in that where is the line between, because we all agreed that there is something exceedingly different that you have to plan for making a short film. But where's that line? Where are you saying like you're planning for a short film and you're not? And I don't necessarily want you to answer that question. It's just something to think about. And it's interesting because the film we have later, A Day in the Country, is 41 minutes long. And at that point, when do you get into a film? When do you start thinking about, feature film narrative in that way?
Yeah.
And when do you switch that light switch off and go into, here's the short film narrative perspective? And it's just very blurred, and it's interesting that
someone could do a PhD dissertation on how short films that become very successful and artistic features are translated from the short film to the feature, and how short films that become lackluster features are translated from the short film to the feature. I think there are some short films out there that they are very, very good short films, but something happens in the correlation between writing for the 10 minutes that you have when you first wrote it to the 90-page screenplay, where you don't expand on anything, you don't add anything, so you have this same idea, but now you're just bloating it up into a 90-minute runtime when it does not deserve that.
Yeah, I think
I have examples if you'd like.
Well, I got one, and it is I gotta look it up. Yeah, Lights Out. Have you ever seen that movie?
The short film is amazing.
Yeah, David F. Sandberg, who's the director of Shazam, who has, by the way, an amazing YouTube channel.
He is a treasure.
David F. Sandberg is a guy who got to start making short films. He made feature films, went to Hollywood and make Shazam, and he has a very informative YouTube channel where he just essentially breaks down lessons he's learned along his career. But David F. Sandberg has made a short film called Lights Out, which is it is the textbook example for the first short film I mentioned, the one and done, get everything. It's a little flash in the pan, spark of creativity, short, brief, to the point. It is one of the best in as far as that goes. I think I've seen it so many times in college courses. They teach it, they show it a bunch. But then he was offered to make it into a feature film. And essentially the short film is just a woman about to go to bed who sees a figure at the end of her hallway, but when she turns on the light, it's gone. You know, light on, light off, light on, light off, and whatever. Jump scare. Great short film. The feature is just, it's so bloated and unnecessary and meandering. And I think it's one of the better examples of feature doesn't translate, or short doesn't translate to feature. Another example, I would say the opposite. If anyone is, again, to bring up Whiplash, the Whiplash short film is you guys have both seen it, right? Whiplash
yes,
the movie.
Yeah.
The Whiplash.
Oh, well, Whiplash the movie.
Yes,
but
Whiplash the short film is essentially the scene in the Whiplash feature where Fletcher turns, he throws the folder, he gets into the first huge verbal tirade. It is essentially just that scene. It still has J.K. Simmons, but it has a different actor for the lead part, and you just go straight into that scene, and that is one of those things where I see it and I'm like, that's not a great short film, but you can see the potential in that.
I wanna say, so like it's great that you bring that up, because do you know if Damien Chazelle had the feature completely written and he just picked out a 10-minute sequence that he wanted to shoot as like a proof of concept?
I'm unsure, but that would make sense.
That sounds correct to me. I don't know though. Right?
You can stretch it to justify that scene existing as its own short film. I personally don't think it does, but I would venture to say that was probably the case, just because that scene, that short film, is essentially the exact same as the scene in the movie.
It's almost shot for shot, I want to say. Yeah. Like, there's a couple inserts that are different, but for the most part,
even the delivery of J.K. Simmons is pretty similar.
He is the same exact character that he is in the feature.
Interesting. I'll have to watch that.
It's okay.
Just a random question. Well, it's not.
I think it's great. I think
it's not a matter of quality.
Yeah.
At all. I think when you get to short films.
Yeah.
Particularly by famous directors, the question of quality goes out the window, and it becomes purely a matter of what has this director done typically before. Typically all these short films are before they became famous. And it's a different question when you have films by famous directors like Dementia 13, I think, was Francis Ford Coppola's first film. And it's utter shit. And then, The Godfather, obviously, a few years later.
Decent.
There's no need to watch Dementia 13 because it's a feature-length film. You're wasting your time. But when it comes to short films, even if they're shitty by famous directors, there's no wasting your time because they are short.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to watch them. And I think in the case of Whiplash, I would be very interested to watch that short film and seeing the juxtapositioning of like what he did before and then the actual film produced in its full entirety.
That's another interesting one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it's with Damien Chazelle, he already made a feature prior to shooting the Whiplash short film
with one of the ASU professors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait,
the Madeline and trombone player or something like that. It's
Guy and Madeline on a park bench. I own it on DVD.
We're getting a call here. There we go. Okay. Watching a short film by a well-known director when they were in film school is like watching a childhood archive videotape of when you were a toddler. And you kind of see where their roots are and how they extend. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Doodlebug, which is Christopher Nolan's short film.
I was going to watch it, but I didn't.
Whatever you think Christopher Nolan would make in film school, that's what Doodlebug is. Oh, whatever you're imagining with like structure.
Just a regular kind of Christopher Nolan movie then.
It's a Christopher Nolan film through and through. I can tell you guys what it is if you'd like.
Well, I just want to comment and say that it's good to hear you say that, and I think it's good for like a lot of young filmmakers almost. I mean, I don't want to diminish the fact that the work you do in college is incredibly important to your future success in any yes, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it is nice to see short films by famous directors that are of lesser quality, that are not as good, that are that kind of like baby film. I don't see as much of them because they don't survive as well.
Have you seen Kubrick's first movie?
Well, the point is it gives you hope as like
I'm saying Kubrick's first movie
filmmaker.
Is terrible.
Right.
Horrible.
Francis Ford Coppola as well.
Yeah.
And it's good to see these things in that as a filmmaker, there is something intangible about growing as an artist beyond college or beyond your first feature or beyond whatever, that something does change. You're not stuck with the artistic sensibility you have today forever.
I do want to recommend another one.
Yes.
I know you don't like this movie, Jacob, but I just want to tell you the Bottle Rocket short film, as somebody who loves Bottle Rocket, it sucks. It sucks so much.
Maybe I'll love it.
Here's another thing I want to bring up, because there's a third avenue of short film, and this is really stretching the definition, but another way that I see a lot as far as people getting their movie made is that they make trailers before. A notable example would be the Coen Brothers' Blood Simple. That was a trailer. They shot a bunch of shots for a trailer, cut it all together, made it really exciting, showed that trailer to investors in Minnesota, got a bunch of money together to make the feature. That's essentially
like how people do with crowdfunding these days.
Yes.
It's like put like proof of concepts on GoFundMe or
another one
to get money from people.
The Planet Terror Death Proof double feature, when it was out, had these amazing, horrible, schlocky trailers done by famous directors. Edgar Wright did one. I forget his name. Spy Kids. He's probably done better movies than the Spy Kids. But
Robert Rodriguez.
Robert Rodriguez, who not only did Planet Terror, did one.
Alita Battle Angel is the better film that you're thinking of.
But the one Hobo with a Shotgun, the movie with Roy Batty, I forget his name. Whatever. That movie, Hobo with Rutger Hauer. The movie with Rutger Hauer, Hobo with a Shotgun, was initially a trailer as well. And these aren't short films, but these are also fun. But what is a short film? What is a short film?
Right.
It's a shorter film.
Yeah. It's But
it's like trying to pinpoint what's art,
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were in college, the kind of academic definition that doesn't necessarily work for every short film would be that it is a singular event, conflict, or I'm forgetting the terminology that I'm looking for, but a single conflict, like where a film develops a conflict over time. A short film is just about getting to the point of that conflict and the resolution in a scene, essentially.
The main thing that USC keeps stressing to all their students is your short film should be, on some level, a calling card for what your sympathies are towards your art and what your stylistic what's the
your
word?
Personal style is.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
And you get that a lot where I think some people think they need to make the greatest film that revolutionizes cinema with their short film, but that's really not the case. I can think of a couple. Robert Zemeckis' short film. I don't know if you've seen it.
Marwin. Welcome to Marwin.
I think that's a feature that he made.
I'm just kidding. It's the one with Steve Carell. Yeah.
He made a Twilight Zone ripoff of a guy that couldn't catch an elevator in his apartment, so he constantly walked up the stairs trying to get to the open doors before they closed, and then he had a heart attack, and then he died. Super simple. That's
that.
all it was.
I love that.
So one of those films that I'm thinking about that are like, you look at it and it's very much a progression of the director, like it's something the director has made, is just today I watched Vincent, which is Tim Burton's first short film.
Wow.
And it's a animated stop motion short, and it's just a little boy named Vincent is like very like a normal little boy, except that he wants to be Vincent Price, who's plays all these horror movies.
That's the most Tim Burton thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of scenes of him like Tim Burton is of like Vincent is nice to his aunt when she comes over.
Does he do a Vincent Price?
But he really wants to make her into wax and put her in a museum, right? Like it's just a bunch of different versions of that, of like morbid kind of real life to morbid transition. And it's looking at it, it's like it's one of the first things Tim Burton ever did, and it's incredibly Tim Burton. And it's interesting to see there are some directors like that where it's just the short film is like more than a calling card. It might be like a manifesto for their existence as a director.
There's a short film by Barry Jenkins when he was at NYU or Columbia, I forget where he went, but it's very much a him film. All it is a right after 9/11, it's a New York laundromat owner who's also Saudi Arabian, talking about how much he loves the American flag, but when he's talking about the American flag, all it is shots of his wife, and it's kind of poetic in a very unique way, but it almost makes no sense. But at the same time, it shows all of his sensibilities that he uses to the nines now. But then you have other short films like Coffee and Cigarettes. I don't know if you've seen.
Hey!
Wait,
Paul
Thomas Anderson.
He's talking about Paul Thomas Anderson.
Oh,
yeah.
Which one are you? Is there another
Jim
Coffee and
Jim
Cigarettes?
Jarmusch. Okay, this is.
Okay.
Jim
Well,
Jarmusch made a feature film that is just 10 short films, all revolving around coffee and cigarettes. But I have seen the one you're talking about.
Okay.
I have not.
Yes.
It's
a great precursor to Magnolia.
Yes. I think he turned it into Hard 8, right? Did he not?
I don't know if he turned it into Hard 8, but I know the main guy in Hard 8, the older man, who's in a lot of the early PTA movies, is in this movie.
Yes.
Isn't John C. Reilly also in it?
No, not in this.
That's just Hard 8. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, there is another famous actor that you would know their face.
Yeah.
But I do not know
their name. Well, the thing is, I've seen Hard 8, but I've only seen the version that's available on YouTube, which is horrible VHS quality.
Oh, okay.
But no, continue.
Well, I've only seen Coffee and Cigarettes, which is a horrible, like, Betamax rip of the original thing.
Yeah.
Then you have other notable directors like Steven Spielberg's Amblin. I don't know if you've ever seen the Amblin short. I mean, it's a 30-minute long music video that just tells the story visually. I think it's fantastic. But I am also super biased towards Steven Spielberg. So I think that kind of speaks for itself.
So I'd like to just state that we need to wrap up the general conversation about short films.
Okay.
So final thoughts on that, and then Chandler and I need to get on to the BFI.
Yes.
And the ones
Uh,
that we
I
suggested
think-
to each other.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Short films are
Yes.
a great avenue. Short films are a great avenue to experiment with the medium of cinema and see where you can tell stories and what constitutes a satisfying narrative. Because some of the greatest films ever made started out as just conceptual short films that people took a chance on and then developed into something bigger.
Yeah, the experiment is a huge part of it, because I think even
Yes.
now, like someone like David Lynch, who almost only makes exclusively short films now, if you see a shitty short film, you move on with your life. Whereas if you see a shitty movie feature, you're kind of mad for a little bit. It is the perfect low stakes medium to just try anything.
Yes.
And
I think another way of putting that is that if you show a shitty short film to a potential investor, they'll stop thinking about it and just move on to other proposals. If you show a shitty movie to an investor and you're trying to make your second feature film, they're going to look at you and they're going to...
They know you can't...
okay, we're checking you off their list.
Yeah, they're going to blacklist you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think with short films, it's... Let me speak from personal experience for a second here. It's good to experiment with short films, but it's also good to have a very concrete idea of what you're doing before you do it.
Yep.
In that, some of the short films that I did in college, I look back on now as I needed to have done them differently, although I am happy to have done them the way I did them because I learned a lot from that. And it's also important that, like, if you're going to experiment, make sure you're looking for the lessons in that experiment after you're done, and you're not just abandoning that project and moving completely onto something else.
Agreed.
Yeah. Any other wrapping up thoughts, Brenton, before we kick you out?
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for,
the last
making
short film I want to... Yes, for the very first time. It was a brand new, wholesome experience. Seeing everything and hearing everything for the very, very first time. There's one short film that everyone should watch, and it should be mandatory, and that is The Next Floor.
Is that the Denis Villeneuve one?
That is the Denis Villeneuve film.
Oh,
That's
so you
what
mean
got
the platform?
him Blade Runner 2049, and it is my favorite short film.
It's one of those short films where it's an idea that's just explored and then it's done.
Yes.
That's all I have to say.
It's great.
But yeah, thank you for having me, guys. It was a pleasure.
Of course.
I hope
thank you for being here.
This time the audio works.
I'm sure it will. I'll make
it is
work
still
regardless,
recording on
whatever.
my end, so
if not, I can dub it.
There's something.
We'll just dub everything. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Brent.
Yes.
We look forward to your next grand entrance to the podcast.
Wonderful.
When this episode gets lost.
Time.
my next first time on the podcast.
Your third first time.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Goodbye. Enjoy talking about the other two short films.
Okay, so what do we want to discuss first? Which one?
Let's discuss the ones we recommended to each other.
Okay, so let's Chandler recommended the short film Cousins to me by Jim Jarmusch, which is part of his longer anthology of short films
that he filmed over 20
Coffee
years.
and Cigarettes.
Yeah.
So Cousins stars Alfred Molina and
Steve Coogan.
Steve Coogan. And they meet in a coffee shop. They both play themselves, and they meet in a coffee shop. So I don't know if you just want to quickly go into why you recommended me this, and then I'll let you know what I think.
I really enjoy the Coffee and Cigarettes film overall. Some really, really high highs and some lows make for a pretty good anthology film. But this one, of all of them, it might it's not my favorite. It's probably my second or third favorite, but I think it's the funniest. I think Steve Coogan is such an asshole in this, and Alfred Molina is so genuine, and I love the way that the power dynamic switches. You can just see Steve Coogan sort of recoil at his own assholery, and I just find it to be the funniest of the 10.
So with Jim Jarmusch, I'm not always into his films, mostly because his style as a director is very slow paced, kind of
Very.
naturalistic.
Have you heard him talk?
No,
He talks exactly like his movies are.
of course he does.
Very slow, very deep voice, but very funny.
You know, it's just a capturing of life, kind of in media res kind of situation with him.
It's kind of, if you don't get immediately on board with the characters, you are going to slog through his movies.
Yeah, quit while you're ahead if you're not on board.
Yeah.
But I'd have to say that I think the short film is the medium of choice for Jim Jarmusch for me, because even if I'm not on board with the characters, that there is a quickly fast approaching ending.
This is the longest of the short films, though, in this anthology.
Really?
Yeah, it is the longest one.
So Cousins ? I really enjoyed this. This was great. It was really funny. I would agree with you on that. And then Steve Coogan asks Alfred Molina, "Are you gay?" And they have this awkward conversation based around that. There's a lot of great pregnant pauses between the two of them.
Oh my god.
Where the conversation's just left hanging. Great. Like, there's a difference. I've seen pregnant pauses in college short films where they're absolutely horrifying to watch. You never want to have a college film pregnant pause.
Yeah.
This is this is like real, this is acting with purpose, like a pause with purpose, and it works really well.
The funniest thing about this movie is I wonder why Steve Coogan even agreed to have coffee with him. From minute one, he seems so disinterested.
It was interesting because I was spending a lot of the first half of the film, really just kind of like pinning down like what's the dynamic between the two characters. I wasn't sure for a while, and I don't know, for a short film, it really worked on a sense of like just character conflict of where like one character has a goal, another character has another goal. Mm-hmm. Steve Coogan's goal is to get the fuck out of there, which just makes it very funny because Alfred Molina you're right, he's so earnest, and I felt bad for him the entire time. I'm like, yes, I want to be your friend, Alfred Molina.
Yeah, he's such a nice guy.
I'd love to be your cousin.
Yeah, but that's the thing is that this it's just short film. I love it because it's so simple, but at the same time there is a clear structure to it. It's a microstructure where the acts change mid-sentence, but it is a very complete story. And you know, all of these short films, the one thing that is consistently great through all 10 of these is the shots of coffee are amazing. The coffee looks delicious.
So this short film, I know you've only seen one film by this director, but Hong Sang-soo, who did Korean film director who did The Day He Arrives.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this feels very much like his filmography. I've watched a lot of his movies over the past couple months.
Which The Day He Arrives,
black and white usually, and people just talking.
Yeah.
And it's just character dynamics.
And that's the thing. That's the whole movie is just people talking, but it's just how interesting you find these characters.
Yeah, this made me want to watch the rest of them. So I guess this is my recommendation for Jim Jarmusch's Coffee and Cigarettes.
The Coffee and Cigarettes, the best ones are this one. There's one with Bill Murray and members of the Wu-Tang Clan. And then there's one with Tom Waits and Iggy Pop that is just so Jim Jarmusch it hurts. But yeah, there's not really a lot to say about this because it's so simple. It's just enjoyable.
Yeah, one of the things I found very likable about the comedy is the very natural way of there's expectation set up by the conversation,
Yeah.
and a subversion of that expectation, which is traditionally that's what comedy is, if you're really boiling it down. And one of the examples of that is, like I said, Steve Coogan says, "You're not gay, are you?" And then the conversation goes on, and a little while later, Alfred Molina tells him, "All I want you to do is acknowledge this extraordinary thing and love me." And I just cracked up laughing because you have that mind, the idea in your head that Steve Coogan's asking him, is he gay? And then he says this later on, like, you're not helping your case. This is funny, but you're so earnest, right?
But that's
this subversion of just normal conversation.
That's what I love about it is Steve Coogan literally has no reason to be an asshole to the extent that he is. I mean, it's not like this is some random fan who's trying to have this. They're both in the same league of actor. If anything, I feel like Alfred Molina is probably a little more popular than
that's what I was going to say.
Coogan. But
I didn't want to state it out loud.
Coogan's just an asshole for no reason, but he's such a funny asshole. But yeah,
it's great.
It's fun. It's a fun time. It's that kind of short film where there's nothing really going on aside from the director's style. I saw this is my first Jarmusch movie, and this is what made me want to check out everything. And it was at this point during the short film where I was just the comedic timing, not only in the performances, but the editing is fantastic. Like you said, the pregnant pause. It's so painfully awkward, but in the best way possible.
Yeah. So our next short film that I recommended to Chandler was Wasp from 2003. What is Wasp?
Wasp is it's white trash art is what it is.
It's British white trash art.
It is It is essentially a story about a mother who lives in a very poor mother living in a not so great part of England, who has 4 children. No father in the picture, and they're obviously very poor. They have moldy bread. They have a bug problem. Their house is just in total disarray. And the film opens on the mother fighting a neighboring mother because her child got into a fight with her child. It's a great way to start off. It shows the dynamic.
To say fighting, it's like they're cursing each other out.
There's a little bit of physical contact.
Hair. The mother is clearly, it's interesting that like the mother is clearly a bad influence.
Yes.
In a way.
Yes.
We're not really given, there's no like social commentary really going on.
No.
It's not saying like she's put in here by society or anything. It's just showing
us how
the mother is this very vulgar person.
It shows us how bad their situation is, but it doesn't point any fingers as to how they got there. It's a very simple story where this mother runs into an ex-boyfriend and lies to the ex-boyfriend that those aren't her kids. She's just babysitting them, so they'll go on a date. And then there's a movie that I watched earlier this year called Daddy Longlegs, which is a Safdie brothers movie that is very similar in the fact that it is just a movie about... In Daddy Longlegs, you can say eccentric. Here, I'm not going to go as far as the color eccentric. She's just not that great of a mother.
She's just a bitch.
She really is.
I mean that nicely. That's how you would describe her.
Yes.
As a person.
She is just not very friendly. But the thing is about this movie is that she is a largely unsympathetic character, but she's not completely unsympathetic. She does have, in a way, a motherly instinct, a loyalty to her children, even if she leaves her kids out in front of a bar for 6 hours unattended. She obviously cares for her kids. It's just that she isn't a very good mom.
Yeah. So a little history with the short film. I watched this. My professor showed me this in college. My capstone professor, who was trying to drill into all of our heads. Here's like a simple short film that it works really well just because of its story, not necessarily because of visuals or anything.
Yeah.
So it was an example in class, and that's how it was presented to me at first. And I have since gone on to watch some of the director's Andrea Arnold.
Did you see
actual
American
feature films.
Honey?
I did not know. Is that her?
That is her. Yeah.
Oh wow. Have you seen
I have
it?
not. It's one of those movies that I have seen a lot of stills and scenes from. I just think that is not for me. But after seeing this short film, I'm considering it.
Yeah, I saw Fish Tank,
Okay.
which I think it has one of the same actors. It has Michael Fassbender
Oh, interesting.
in one of a really great role. Like he's awesome in that film.
Yeah.
And I'd really recommend watch Wasp. It's an interesting short film.
It is. It's really good.
And if you like that,
it's really good.
Her film Fish Tank is just a feature length, not the same story,
Yeah.
but the same style. Right?
This is kind of the perfect short film because it works in its own, structure as its own short film. It explores every avenue of the possible story. Nothing feels underdeveloped. Everything feels just as clear and concise it needs to be. But at the same time, you can also see where this director's sensibilities lay, and you could see the potential for a feature adaptation. It's kind of the perfect short film in that sense. It's stylistically it runs into the same problems as a lot of short films do, where it's a lot of just shaky cam coverage just because it's the most economic way to shoot to get the most out of limited availability. But I don't think that ever really it's a style that works for this kind of movie. Mm-hmm. Because it's a very frantic, very chaotic, very intimate energy to it all. And especially in the beginning, just when we're meeting these characters and we're cutting between them, just close-ups of their face, I think it really works in that opening scene.
Yeah, so you liked it.
I do. I really liked it.
Just
okay. It was the good. I also just want to point out I love white trash movies, and there is this American conception of English people that the stereotypical English person in our mind has always been the lead actor in A Matter of Life and Death, the eloquent, the educated, soft-spoken, polite gentleman. And I love seeing just white trash English people because it is a complete subversion of that idea we've grown accustomed to. It was like the Florida Project, but in England.
Oh yeah.
It makes me wonder if Sean Baker has seen this because it's very similar.
Probably. Yeah, I'm just gonna state for the record that if you're into the British white trash thing here, you specifically, Chandler, and then I guess anyone who's listening, Fish Tank, I highly recommend it.
Okay.
It's maybe not as consistently good, if that makes sense. Yeah. Just because it's a feature and it's a little longer, it has more opportunity for issues. But it is, I think, more than worthwhile watching because it is a very unique individual voice coming out of the UK and seeing a side of Britain that a lot of films don't show. To lead into our next short film, I would like to say that this is Wasp in particular is a short film, not a short film. So what I mean by that is it is a shorter version of a movie.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not like Next Floor, which is just a single concept and it's very clearly a short film.
Is a very clear 3-act structure.
Yes, Wasp could be a longer movie. It would not. You just have to put more scenes into it.
Yeah.
It's not a short film where you'd have to redesign everything from the ground up to make it a feature.
I agree.
So another film, one of our BFI films this week was A Day in the Country.
Yep.
And I think that is very much even by the director's admission, it's a short movie, not a short film. Even though it is only 40 minutes long.
Okay, so we're just jumping into this then, because my issue with this movie, as much as I liked it, is that it makes it very clear from the beginning that this is an unfinished work. And I agree in the sense that I feel like there is a first and a third act and no second act.
So a little bit about A Day in the Country. It is a film from
1936.
1936 by Jean Renoir, who is related to, maybe the son of the famous painter Renoir, the Impressionist. So a very high pedigree of family here we're talking about. And it is 41 minutes long. It was incomplete it's one of those movies that I think the backstory behind the film makes it so much more interesting than the actual film itself
Okay,
is.
because I don't know the backstory.
Because the Jean Renoir, the film he made before this, which I just found out today by watching some of the behind the scenes features,
yeah,
was legitimate communist propaganda. The Communist Party of France hired him to make a movie, and he made one for them. And then he went from that overt political statement to this, which is very much just, here's a day in the country. Why not? Just show you some inconsequential frolicking in the grass, right? And this film was shot over the period of like 50 days, and only 30 of those days actually had any footage shot at all. And so
what were they doing?
I
for
got
the
the
other
sense
20?
I got the sense from behind the scenes features that Jean Renoir, he's either like working like 100% or he's not working at all, and he's just
Wow,
dicking around on set.
interesting.
Don't quote me on that. That's just the feeling I got. And the short film, this film was actually Jean Renoir had to leave, and it was just sitting around for a while. I think the producer got someone else to direct a few of the shots they needed. And then World War II broke out, and the producer was Jewish, so he had to flee. And the film literally just sat in a storage room for the entirety of World War II, which is amazing because a lot of films were burnt and destroyed in World War II. It just sat there. And then later on, a relative of one of the people who worked on the film edited it without Jean Renoir whatsoever and put it and then made it into an actual what we see today, and it was shown at the very first Cannes Film Festival.
Interesting.
Which this film has a extraordinarily eventful history to it,
and then it's just
it's just kind of yeah
amazing. Yeah, I mean, it again though. What I see is not bad or anything. It's just that there is I enjoy the characters. I enjoy their performances. I enjoy the way that it captures the countryside. I just don't see. Okay, I'm just gonna be honest with you. When the Frenchman and the Parisian's daughter were going to the forest and they started kissing, it kind of looked like he was raping her or trying to rape her.
No, yeah.
And then it jumps.
It's the old just kiss them until they want it tactic.
But that's the thing is though that her face before they go down, she looks traumatized, and then it cuts to the very end, or cuts forward and
epilogue.
Yeah, and they have this sort of. It's almost like In the Mood for Love, where they were in love but they didn't end up together, and it's tragic. But at no point did I feel like they were in love. There was a romance. It was barely a summer fling, if you could even call it that.
The film, in terms of its plot, falls apart in the end.
Yeah.
Because there is nothing there footage-wise. Like, it just was incomplete.
Yeah.
And it's very apparent.
And that's what I mean by there's a first and a third act. There's no second act. There is no these two falling in love.
Well, I feel like it's the end of the second and the beginning of the third act that was cut out.
Yeah.
Like, the important chunk of the narrative was cut out there. And it's interesting because I see a lot of inspiration from this film to a lot of other ones. Mm-hmm. Just, I don't know. There were moments in the film. This is one of those movies that I watch it and it inspires me to create something because I know I could potentially do something at least as good as this or better. I don't want to say so, but it is a work incomplete in that sense. And the fact that it's incomplete as an aspiring filmmaker myself, leaves my mind like rushing to fill the gaps of like, what else could you do with this idea?
Yeah.
And I love the idea of it's just a family who is going to the country, and there's two guys there who chase after the girls, and the father and the engaged guy or whoever, who they're just oafish and they're fishing and they don't care about the women they came with, and it's charming.
I love that it's almost like a subversion where it's the city people that are being taken advantage of by the country people. Usually that's not how it goes. But another thing that I thought was pretty great was just the little mini monologue that the not as horny French countryman tells to the hornier one, where he's just like, if you get with this girl and then she's gonna have a kid, and I can't picture you settling down, so is it even worth it? But then he goes and does it. So then I'm like, okay, the one thing that I thought was really good doesn't even turn out to make any sense. So yeah.
For me, as my sensibilities as making films, the parts that I really enjoyed were some of the scenes on the river.
Yeah,
they're very placid, very peaceful.
Yeah, very nice.
And then there's some like in transitions shots where it's just the rain on the river, and it's very nice, and like this is like stuff I'd love to take inspiration from in the future.
Yeah.
But as watching it, it's so incomplete.
Yeah.
And it's so...
I agree.
Even what's there is just...
It's okay.
It's simple. It's, I can't say it's bad. I can't say it's good. No, I can't say it's bad. I can't say it's great.
Yeah. It's fine.
I'd love to see what Jean Renoir originally had planned.
Yeah, I agree.
You never can. You never will.
Yeah.
And as it stands, obviously this is on the BFI list. I've made my point incredibly clear the last time we talked about a short film. Short films don't belong on this list. This one in particular.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
To lead into our next one, Jean Renoir is actually in this movie. He is the owner. He's only in like one or two shots. He's the owner of the house that serves the fish.
Interesting.
I don't know, but he talks about frying fish.
Yeah.
And then Louis Buñuel is also in An Andalusian Dog. He's the man who cuts the very first person you see is him.
Oh,
director.
Yeah. I
Right.
didn't.
So let's move on to that.
I looked at Louis Buñuel's filmography, and it was interesting that it was, Un Chien Andalou and then Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, and there's a 50-year gap in between those, which I just found really interesting. But yeah, how what is it again? The pronunciation? Un Chien.
You're asking the wrong person.
Okay, well
that.
it's
Un Chien Andalou.
Okay, Un Chien Andalou, which is an Andalou boy, whatever.
An Andalusian boy.
Andalusian boy is a surreal short film created by
Salvador
Dali
and
Louis Buñuel. It is a film where stuff happens. And I don't mean that.
That's what I'd say.
And I don't mean, because here's the thing. I watched this for the first time like a month or two ago. I thought that was cool. I don't know what it means. And for the longest time, I just thought, oh, it must be dumb. I just don't understand the metaphor. And then it wasn't until today that I looked up where they're like, yeah, it means nothing. It's not supposed to mean anything. And then I'm like, oh, well, okay. And I like it a little bit more in retrospect because of that. It is a movie that is most famously has the shot of an eye being slit, which I still don't know how they did that.
Oh, it's like a goat.
Oh, is it? It's always
it's
a
like
goat.
A dead goat.
It's always a goat or a cat.
Yeah, I hate eyes.
Yeah.
Anything dealing with puncturing an eye.
Well, this is,
and I will leave the room.
So the film is essentially. I read into the production where it was Louis Buñuel and Salvador Dali essentially discussed their weird surreal dreams, and they compiled a bunch of them together into a movie, and that's really all it is scene after scene of these insanely strange sequences that aren't connected by any sort of narrative or even theme or logic. It is more than anything a painting brought to life, specifically a Salvador Dali painting.
Yeah, I'd almost want to say that they're all kind of bridged by a Freudian attraction between characters of every scene is a man and a woman and the relationship between them, and then the next scene is some idea that jumps off of that, right? Like a man watches I don't know where even to begin with this short
it's-
film. So I'll just say that like this film clearly has a huge impact on cinema in the future that makes no sense. If you've ever seen a movie that makes no sense,
Yes.
I suppose you could trace its roots back to this.
Yeah.
That is surreal. Anything that it doesn't conform to a traditional narrative, you can probably trace it back to this in some way.
A lot of David Lynch in
And-
this too.
Oh yeah.
A lot of it.
But this seems like ideas, some early filmmakers were expressing ideas in clunky ways that are interesting to watch because it is so surreal and so kind of like disjointed in its effect, and you're looking for those bridges between the narrative and like trying to catch up to it. And if it was an hour long, it wouldn't, like at a feature length, it wouldn't work, but it's 20 minutes long, so you're there
Exactly.
and then you're done. And today I don't want to sound like sacrilegious by saying this, but like I've seen a lot of these ideas done in films better. And by better, I mean just more, the idea has blossomed into a full-blown flower of the surrealism is portrayed in a way that doesn't feel kind of start and stoppy that this did, and just new in a way
I
that
agree.
isn't complete.
Yeah, but I give this film extra credit. One, because of the time period it was made in. Film is very much in its infancy at this time. And there wasn't really a lot to go off of as far as influences go, and I think for the time this is actually pretty amazing with some of the stuff they managed to pull off. And not only that, but it's just brave of them to make something this, even because again, even by today's standards, a lot of it's kind of shocking, and I can't even imagine what it must have been like to watch this almost 100 years ago. But yeah, there's really not much to say. It is an art exhibit.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I don't know. I feel like I've been a little harsh on it.
Well, yeah, because
it's an interesting short film.
It is interesting, and it is unlike A Day in the Country, where that is a short film that mirrors the sort of structure or emotional logic of a feature film. This is very much a short film in that it has no real structure. It's all experimentation. And in that sense, I think it's pretty great.
Yeah, where I could see like A Day in the Country is just a shorter movie,
Yeah.
and I might let it slide on this list if it was better, right?
Yeah.
Because it is just a shorter version of a longer movie.
Yeah.
This is so much so a short film, so much so not a narrative feature in any way that you would think about it. And it's almost just different, like a sketch, a surrealist sketch. Short. And if you're making a list for the BFI list, if you're making a list like the most innovative films of all time, this is up there. Like I'd put it even farther up on that list than it is here.
Yeah.
But on a list of the greatest movies ever made, I'm severely questioning some logic of some people putting this on here.
So then to get to the question, I assume you wouldn't.
I've already answered it at least twice, I think.
I'm going to say, yeah.
It does?
It does.
Okay.
Again,
Good.
I give it...
Wow, look at that.
I don't necessarily think that short films should be on it either. But again, the context, the bravery, the influence, I usually don't give these kind of movies a pass, but I'm going to do it this time.
I'll echo you in the sentiment that of the 3 short films on this BFI list, I think we're done after this.
Oh, thank God. This is the
we
one
had Zero
I'll
de Conduit.
Yes.
We had A Day in the Country, and we had An Andalusian Dog. This is the one that deserves to be on here if I had to choose one.
Bill, because the other 2 are just like, okay, these are kind of shittier versions of what would be pretty decent feature films. This is something that I think works. It can only work in this format.
Yeah.
So yeah, I recommend it. It's a pretty short watch. It's freaky. even by today's standards. Yeah. It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Okay, I will just close out by saying that I'm not really. If you're a filmmaker, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know who I'd recommend this.
No,
to.
yeah.
It's interesting because I am me, and I'm really into film history, and all that. But other than that, I'm not sure what kind of application it has in a wider audience, even though it is interesting.
It has every barrier of entry. It's very old. It is black and white. It is foreign. It is short. It makes no goddamn sense. It is about as... But it is short, so maybe that is, if anything, a pro. But yeah, I don't know who I would recommend this to outside of people who share our interests. But, it's 21 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. So, wow, we talked about 4 short films in a little bit of depth, and we talked about short films in general. We talked about a matter of life and death. This was a jam-packed
episode. You don't need another episode for at least a month.
Yep. So the next movie we have on our list is the Los Olvidados from 1950.
Is that a Spanish movie?
It is. This is. It translates to the young. Translates to the young and the damned.
Okay.
It is directed by, also a coincidence, I think not, Louis Buñuel.
Oh, okay. Redemption.
And this is
Second Chance.
This is An Andalusian Dog is a Spanish short film. It was made in Spain.
Oh.
This is a Mexican short film. So
they speak Mexican.
Other side of the Atlantic.
Okay.
Yeah. It is on Amazon Prime for free if you have Amazon Prime.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Awesome.
So it's an hour and 20 minutes long.
Amazing.
We have no idea what else we're doing next week.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Figure it out.
Yeah.